Chapter 5. Blake dialed his mother's number after Alexis left. It rang once and went to voicemail. She must know I'm here, he thought. Why isn't she answering? He tried again and got the same result. He didn't text his mother often, but he sent a short message asking her to get in touch as soon as possible. Blake decided he would make one last attempt to contact his mother before going to bed, but first he wanted to talk with his dad. I've been bringing food over. There's spaghetti in the refrigerator, but I'm sure he would appreciate something freshly cooked by you, Alexis mentioned before she departed. Blake grilled 2 ribeye steaks. He wanted to surprise his dad by having a nice meal waiting for him when he came inside. His decision to go to the army instead of taking over the ranch had dealt a heavy blow to their relationship. Blake disliked country living, being forced to wake up before dawn, putting on layers of clothes, and heading out to feed animals and get the tractor ready for the day was not how he saw himself spending his life. The overpowering stench and cacophony of sounds were too much for Blake to bear. He recalled his days inspecting the cattle during calving season, riding on horseback through snow-covered hills, looking for one cow after another. The experience had extinguished his enthusiasm for taking over the ranch one day. After the war, divorce, and all the trouble that had followed in its wake, Blake wondered what his life would have been like if he hadn't left Friendly. Would he still be married? Would he have made up with Maribel by now? Blake put a grill pan on the stove and began preparing steaks. He was finishing up when his father came inside. Silas Peterson was grumbling when he walked through the door at 10 after 8. Blake waited until the front door squeaked closed and his father called out, "Lex, you making steaks?" "It's Blake, not Lex," he called from the kitchen. His father was quiet for a moment before saying, Son, you're home?" Blake was shocked when his father came barreling through the kitchen and threw his arms around him. "Dad, it's good to see you too," Blake said, shocked at the level of affection his father was showing. "Son, I need you so much right now. I knew you'd come to your senses and come back to the ranch. Your old ranger is still out there, back behind the old barn. Welcome home." "Thank you. His father released him and said, "Take a few days to get acclimated to everything. After that, we get you set up with all the knowledge you need to be a successful rancher. We're so glad you're here." "Dad, let's sit down and talk. I've got ribeyes for us." "Luxury after a long day's work. Thank you, son." His dad sat at the table, letting out a long sigh. Blake brought out the steaks and glasses of sparkling grape juice. His father rubbed his belly and said, "Oh, wow, this is exactly what I need." Blake eased into a chair opposite his dad. He waited for his father to get a few tastes of the steak. "This is wonderful, son." Blake was shocked his father had said nothing about his mother or siblings. It was strange that they were not at home. Why was his father pretending like everything was normal? "Dad, where's Mom?" Blake's father looked down at his plate and shaved off another piece of steak. He chewed slowly and washed down the meat with a drink of the sparkling grape juice before responding. "Blake, your mother's on vacation." "Really? How long has she been gone?" His father smiled. "Not long. Let's talk about the ranch, okay? First, tell me where the Sibs are." "They're just spending time with Lex. You know how it is. Bunch of kids hear about their mom doesn't work. Your mother will be back soon and we'll be back to normal." Blake considered challenging his father's fantasies, but it was getting late. He ate and listened to his father talk about the ranch, pretending everything was fine. The next morning, Ruby watched her granddaughter prepare breakfast for her great-grandson. Ruby had folded blueberries into the batter before Maribel woke up. Her granddaughter was a lot of things, but a cook was not one of them. It was tempting to head in and help, but Ruby didn't want to steal the mother-son moment that would take place when Lucien came bounding down the steps. It was hard to balance her grandmother and great-grandmother duties. In reality, they were more minimal than she liked, but allowing a parent to parent was important. Maribel would have to manage things without them when she and Teddy were no longer around. Of course, Maribel had always been an exceptional mother. She was tough when she had to be, but mostly she was very tender with her son. Ruby's eyes filled with tears. This is what all the sacrifices were for, Ruby thought. They have such a beautiful connection. Ruby had been terrified when Maribel told him that she was pregnant. She felt like the pattern was repeating itself, and in reality, it was. Both Ruby and her daughter Caroline had married because they were pregnant. It was like they'd passed on their indiscretions to Maribel. But this time, Ruby was determined to do things right. She and Teddy, her second husband, would not push Maribel into the marriage. Instead, they would just let her know they were ready to support her and the new baby. Sadly, Caroline wasn't willing to stand by Maribel, and the pregnancy had ended her connection to the family. The last time Ruby saw Caroline, she was throwing her bags in the old Porsche she'd spent her life savings on before zipping out of the driveway. Lucien had never met his grandmother, and his grandfather had breezed in a few times over the years, but his family was Maribel and them. "Where's Grandma?" Lucien asked. He'd just come down for breakfast. Ruby had watched him kiss his mom on the cheek and take a seat at the table. She was eager to hug her great-grandson, but she waited until she heard him inquire. "I'm right here, kiddo," she said, hoping that her entrance seemed natural, even though she was sure Maribel knew she had been watching close by. "Mom's making pancakes. She makes them better than anyone. You gotta have some, Grandma." Ruby smiled and sat across the table from Lucien. "You making enough for me to have some?" Ruby asked. "Of course, Gram. There'll be plenty for Grandpa, too." "Thanks for pancakes, Mom." "I love the way you make them," Lucien said. Maribel looked over at Ruby. She winked at her granddaughter, letting her know that her secret was safe. Lucien didn't need to know his great-grandma made the pancake batter. "Sure thing, kiddo," Maribel said, tossing a blueberry in Lucien's direction. He stood up and scrambled to catch it. "Maybe we have a baseball player in our midst." "You know your mom used to play softball in high school," Ruby said. "Only for 9th grade. Then someone interrupted my high school fun," Maribel said with a smirk. "Best thing that ever happened to you," Lucien said, winking at Ruby.